Hey, hey. Tobago updates.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Well, viewers, we are now being joined by the political leader of the Tobago Council of the PNM, Mr. Ancil Denis, as we get set to talk about some politics, some things that are happening within the space. So a special good morning and welcome to you. So how are you?
Good morning to you. I'm fine, and good morning to Tobago. It's always a pleasure to be on Tobago Updates.
Great. Now, let's get started you guys had a public meeting just this past weekend on Sunday, and this is perhaps the first since the elections.
Yes, it was the first public meeting since the election. We are going about things in a very organized and strategic way. So we spent some time treating with some of the internal matters of the party, and now we are ready to hit the ground again. So we had our first public meeting. This evening we have a walkabout in the community of Buccoo once the weather permits. And then the following Sunday after this Sunday will be in Charlottesville. And following that, people could look forward to seeing a presence of the PNM on the ground. We have appointed 47 community advocates, between 2 to 5 persons in each electoral districts. And they will have a responsibility to give support and be the eyes, the ears, and the voice of the PNM in the respective communities. So we are back on the ground in a very strategic and serious way.
That's great to hear. Now, you all mentioned some things on Sunday in regards to, there was a lot of lessons learned from the last THA elections, of course, which landed the PNM in the minority. What are some of those lessons that you guys learned?
Well, first of all, we understand the need now to ensure that we remain in touch with the people and the electorate to feel the temperature and feel the pulse. Because, of course, sometimes you may assume that you continue to maintain that support, and then you get to the polls and you realize that is not the case. And in the case of 14-1, of course, we knew that there were some challenges, and one of the main challenges was incumbency and people feeling that it was time for a change. But we did not realize that it was to the extent of a 14-1 result. Of course, a number of the seats were very close. But it was 14-1 nonetheless. So we have learned some valuable lessons, and we are continuing to build the party and preparing to rescue Tobago from what is taking place at this time. Because what is taking place, obviously, is governance that is not in the best interests of Tobago and Tobagonians.
Now, what are some of the other real issues? Because, incumbency, it's sort of a broad reason, but what are some of the underlying reasons that you think that, people were not so satisfied with?
Well, it's a number of factors. And what I will say as well is that the PDP ran a brilliant campaign based on misinformation, and maybe brilliant is not the correct word, but it did work in their favor. So we have to say it was brilliant on their part, based on misinformation, based on lies, based on promises, based on pretending to be who they were not. And I'm happy now that the people of Tobago are seeing them for exactly who they are. So people bought into that campaign, they bought into that mandate, the promises of fixing the issues that Tobago have according to them, the promises of ex gratia payments, the promises of resolving all the contractual issues for public servants, the promises of delivering service to the people of Tobago. Now we are seeing secretaries very inaccessible, some saying blatantly on Facebook, ease me up under pressure and stuff like that. So they really hoodwink the people of Tobago, right? But again, it's politics. Parties win elections, you lose elections, nobody stays in office forever unless it's a dictatorship. And even dictators die after a while. So nobody stays in office forever. But again, the present circumstances are not in the best interest of Tobago, and a number of those issues were discussed on the platform on Sunday night. And I think we were well able to explain to the people of Tobago quite clearly and in basic terms so that the average Tobagonian can understand that what is taking place in Tobago is serving somebody else's interests and not the interests of the people of Tobago.
Okay, and what are some of those things that the PNM will be doing differently this time around for their election campaign? How are you going to, sort of correct some of the mistakes that you made the last time around?
Well, we are far from a campaign, I would hope. I mean, given the current situation, things are very volatile and unpredictable. But an election is not due until 2025, early 2026. So we are doing a number of things differently as we speak. As I said to you before, we appointed 47 community advocates. We are actually learning from the PDP mistakes because when they got into office, they were no way prepared to govern. Secretaries were making and still are making very rookie mistakes. So we understood the need to train people. So as part of that program, we have 47 individuals, some recommended by party groups, some appointed by me directly, utilizing my powers given to me by the party as political leader to appoint some of those advocates. And they will not only be on the ground interacting and interfacing with the people of Tobago, but they will also be exposed to training over the next 2 years to ensure that they are ready to lead, that they are ready to serve, perchance that they end up in the seat of a secretary or an assemblyman or something of the sort. So we are not only about preparing to win an election, but it's important to prepare to govern, and it's important to develop the human capital within the organization called the PNM. So that is a major difference in our approach. And I look forward to that program and the success that it will bring not only to the party, but to the people of Tobago and the individuals involved.
All right, Mr. Denis. Now, I just want to move a little bit away from the political, meeting that we had there on Sunday, because, of course, we have a lot to hear as the weeks and months roll out, and we're definitely looking forward to it. But I wanted to now to this issue of a hotel to be constructed at Kilgren Bay Estate. Now, I know you have quite a lot of information about that. So, first of all, could you just give us some history, some background to that project?
Well, contrary to what you have said, no, I do not have a lot of information on that project. I know it was conceptualized sometime in 2019 or 2020, but I have not heard much about the project until recently, where I'm seeing an article in the newspaper that construction is expected to start in October. And also, I think the Chief Secretary announced that hotel on one of his several trips overseas, saying that that project is coming. But of course, we in the PNM, we welcome development, but it must be done in the right way, respecting the environmental laws. And interestingly, we have a situation right in Friendship as well, which is pretty much close by, where a road is being constructed. I would be honest and say I did not know about the road until I saw that news report on TV6 with a resident complaining that he wasn't consulted and that there was some infringement of his constitutional rights. So this is clearly how this administration is operating. No respect for Tobagonians, no respect for law, no respect for man, and perhaps no respect for God himself.
No, I mean, that particular road, it's of course to give access to the airport. Are you aware of what were the previous plans for this road? Because I mean, I know that when the airport project was being conceptualized, we were able to, the government said that there's going to be a second part which would involve the road. Now, what involvement did the THA have prior to, of course, 2021, as to how that road is going to work?
There were some plans to establish a road in that area to facilitate the airport construction. And there were actually already plans on paper. But let's look at the current situation. This THA executive made a decision to change the land use policy for the Friendship Estate. When we approved the policy previously, it included lands allocated for agricultural usage. They changed it and they excluded agriculture completely. So there are no arrangements for people to do agriculture in that area. I don't know what is it they have against farmers, but a place like Friendship, significant amount of acreage of land, they have excluded agriculture completely. If that's your policy, no problem. As part of the arrangements, lands were allocated to a particular individual to undergo some kind of development in the respected area. That is the Executive Council approving that land use policy.
And when was that
And
approved?
sometime last year or earlier this year, I don't have the exact date. And then you had the situation where they approved the lease. Lo and behold, the secretary comes and cuts a road in the middle of the parcel of land that was approved. So that points to a situation where there is clearly a disconnect between the secretary and perhaps the rest of his executive, where things are being done without consultation. So not only is he not consulting with the people of Tobago and those who will be impacted by this development, but clearly he's not even consulting with his own colleagues. And that explains the chaos that we have had thus far in this administration. The other thing we have to look at is the tendering arrangement. We saw a press
before we
release
get to
coming
the
out.
tendering arrangement, Mr. Denis, because I mean it's so nice to have you here because you are able to bring some perspective as to how this whole thing developed. Now, and we have some extra time, so we could get to some details.
So we're going
right.
to what, 9:15?
Yeah, so we have a little extra time.
I'm looking at the time.
So
okay.
right, but okay, so I want to know what was the communication with the central government, with the THA when you were in office in regards to how that road was supposed to be?
Well, again, I don't have all the details of the project, but of course there were plans to do a road. There were meetings with our counterparts in the central government, those responsible for the airport project, to ensure that what was planned was going to be able to facilitate what was required for the airport project. And the plan was that at some point at the right time, we will have a proper tendering process and the THA will take responsibility for doing the road.
So it was always meant for the THA to handle the construction of the road?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, that was always the arrangement. The THA is responsible for treating with roads in Tobago, right? So that was the plan. But I'm saying we have a situation now where, because I was going to talk about the tendering process.
Yes, we could get into that now.
Now, this Tobago House of Assembly was accused some time ago by myself and the minority leader and other PNM spokespersons of engaging in tendering arrangements that were not in the best interest of Tobago. As a matter of fact, we accused them of handpicking selected contractors from Trinidad, inviting them to Tobago to engage in road projects, as you would know over the years, were always done by Tobagonians. There are at least 5 or 6 contractors in Tobago capable of doing such projects, and they chose to bring people from Trinidad. When that accusation was leveled, both the Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Infrastructure came to this very said table and said to the people of Tobago, no, we did not select contractors in that manner. We had a bag of 40 contractors, right? The Chief Secretary said it wasn't so select, it was open. The Secretary said, well, we had a bag of 40 contractors that we selected from. The minority leader posed questions to the Secretary again, and then we found out that he lied to the people of Tobago, and it wasn't a bag of 40, but a bag of 7. So it came down to 7 contractors for that particular friendship project. Now, there are a number of things that concern me. Number one, the one Tobago contractor that was invited was given 3 days to prepare his designs and all those kinds of stuff. And anybody who understands how these projects and processes work will know that it is impossible to produce and submit designs for a road, get all the necessary approvals and all of that in 3 days. So clearly,
are you saying that perhaps somebody might have had inside information here?
Perhaps, right? I am saying that Tobago contractor definitely was not given a fair chance to get the project.
And you're saying that that's deliberate?
Correct. And in the first place, it wasn't even an open tender. If you look at the THA's website, you will see no open tender with regards to that particular road or any other road that was built recently. So the other thing is that when you were hearing all the discussions about this road, it was said that it was going to be a dual carriageway. Now we are hearing that it was, or that it is going to be a single carriageway. Even when the Tobago contractor was invited to tender, the lone Tobago contractor, it was concerning a dual carriageway. I've heard of no procedure or anything like that concerning a single carriageway. But 8 days after the project was started, because a resident decided to make some noise, and rightfully so, because his constitutional rights were being infringed upon, the Division of Infrastructure releases a ridiculous press release, a very disrespectful press release, saying to the people of Tobago, one, there is an emergency, and because of the traffic situation and all of that, we need to build this road. What is the emergency that requires the division? Now again, I'm not against development. Yes, build a road if you want to build a road. You could build 100 roads in Tobago if you want, if that is your plan for Tobago, that's fine. But I'm saying we cannot have a situation where this administration is flagrantly breaking the law and engaging in tendering procedures that are inimical to Tobago's interests and Tobago's development. So here is it, that you have the same contractor who did the road in Dutchford for $20 million, no tendering process, no designs, and I'm saying that publicly, there are no designs for the project, and I dare the secretary to come and present his designs or the designs that the contractor will utilize to treat with that project. So there are no designs, no proper tendering procedures, no transparency, because again, we in the Tobago space did not know about the road until the media got involved, and then the secretary decided that they're going to put out this press release. And in addition to that, there seems to be some collusion going on, right? So I think these things ought to concern Tobago, that we have a situation where $70 million, $60 million of our money is being spent to do a road. The division decided to trigger an emergency tendering arrangement because, of course, you could sole select contractors, you know. If it's a real emergency, where if you don't do this project, a road might fall along on somebody's house or something of the sort. If it's a real emergency, then of course you can go ahead and select contractors. And even if you want to call it an emergency, why is the arrangement to select contractors outside of Tobago when you have several contractors in Tobago who are well capable of doing such a project? So it reeks of collusion, corruption, and a clear lack of transparency.
Now, what about the argument that, of course, this is the same contractor that constructed the Dutchford Road to Smithfield, and that was, of course, done in 19 days. And, I know Mr. James is going on the premise that, he could, because that was done in 19 days, this other road could also be done in a short space of time. I believe it is 120 days, if I'm not mistaken. How would you respond to that argument?
Well, the fact that the road was done in 19 days at $19 million a day should indicate to Tobagonians that it should not have cost $19 million in the first place. I have seen an assessment, and I am sure it's going to make its way into the public domain. The minority leader has access to that document, where that road could have been done for about $9 million. I also have another assessment that I will bring to the public at some point in time, where this current road that is being done for $60-odd million could be done for about $30 to $40 million, right? But I said to the individual, as professional as he is, to wait. Let's see what is going to be done for the $60-odd million before we bring this to the public, because it could mean that we might be missing something somewhere. Right? And I really want to be fair to them, because as much as the actions may point in a particular direction, I don't like to believe that Tobagonians are so, or those Tobagonians in office are so bent on self-interest that they are willing to operate in ways that will be clearly detrimental to the people of Tobago. Because I'm saying, another thing we have to look at, and bar owners are complaining. Even the people on the doubles stand when I go to buy doubles. The people with the gyros stand when I go to buy gyros. They are complaining that something is happening in Tobago where they are not making as much money as before. People are not spending as much. And when you look at it, if you have $300 million to spend in development, and you give most, let's say 90% of that to Tobago contractors, they will employ Tobagonians, they will engage Tobago hardware stores and stuff like that. They will purchase materials, they will have to pay the people they engage their salaries. These people have an opportunity to spend. And these Tobago contractors engage over 1,000 Tobagonians at a point in time. And
No, but
therefore,
Mr. Denis,
are these contractors from Trinidad engaging Tobagonians in this way? And the answer so far is absolutely not.
so, but Mr. Denis, though, I mean, is it fair to put the economy, the situation of the economy, solely on what happened with the contractors, especially in light that of we just came out of a COVID-19 pandemic, when throughout the world, like we have a situation that exists all over the world where people are struggling financially, people are not spending as they used to.
And yes, I am putting it squarely at their feet. Because
Why?
in a situation, if you know that the economy is struggling coming out of COVID, and yes, all the economies of the world will struggle as a result of the impacts on COVID, then that should be more reason to ensure that whatever you do and whatever money you spend as far as possible remains in Tobago. So clearly, they do not care about the economy of Tobago and Tobagonians. Even food support that people got during the pandemic, food cards, food hampers. I remember there was a big issue about PNM assemblymen making that support available to people. Now I am hearing of people applying for food cards since last year from the THA, and they are yet to receive it, right? Even the situation with Novo, you know we come out of a pandemic recently, right? The farmers actually had some of the best times during the pandemic because we had to engage in giving food support, and all of the goods, all of the items required for that came from farms right here in Tobago. So they know this. They know that we're coming out of a pandemic. They know that the Tobago economy needs every cent that it could get, and they choose to spend 20 million plus 20 million in Dutch Fort, plus 25 million in Moriah, plus
But I mean,
60 odd
again, but
million
Mr.
down in
Dennis,
Friendship.
also that
Yes,
money
no.
has not yet been
Plus
spent yet.
300, it has not been spent yet. But guess what? It is a bill on the THA's books. So I don't want to hear the argument that we're getting it on credit. The fact is that money is already earned by these contractors because the THA has to pay the bills. And that is even more alarming because we have a situation where Tobago contractors are being owed and not paid. And guess what? Some of these Trinidad contractors who started work recently have already received payments according to my information, right? So that is even more damaging that Tobago contractors owe this money. I hope that they are not owing any of their workers, right? But I'm sure they are owing the banks, right? And we have a situation where this administration chooses to spend all our development money on Trinidad contractors in circumstances where we have the capacity in Tobago. And I want to say this as well. That is one of the reasons as well why they cannot get things done as it relates to infrastructure. Because right now, the quarry is the only source of asphalt on the island, right? That contractor who is doing the road in Friendship, he has to get his asphalt from the quarry. And by the way, the quarry is going to sell him at perhaps $1,300 per ton. And I'm sure the bill to the THA for that same asphalt, when you look at the bill of quantities, is going to be perhaps double the cost of that. But the point I'm making is you have 2 or 3 contractors in Tobago who have their own plant that could produce their own asphalt, right? That will not rely on the THA or on the quarry to get asphalt for their projects. You decide that you're going to sideline those contractors, and therefore you have cut off 2 or 3 points of asphalt production so that you could be able to do your paving, fix your potholes, build your roads and stuff like that in Tobago. You have cut those off by sidelining those contracts on the ridiculous claims of audit and audit and audit, when they are bringing contractors from Trinidad who are under audit, right, or under some arrangement in the court where the central government is concerned. But they could come to Tobago and do work in Tobago. But you have sidelined those contractors, and your only source of asphalt in Tobago right now is the quarry. The THE has to rely on the quarry, and the contractors that they bring into Tobago also have to rely on the quarry. Okay. And that explains why the situation is so bad as it relates to the division of infrastructure being able to deliver to the people of Tobago.
Mr. Denis, why is it that we come to a situation where a lot of the contractors that were engaged prior to 2021 were still owed money? What efforts did your administration make or didn't make to make sure that those bills were paid?
So that is the way the THE operates. Let me explain it to you. Now, every year you get $200 or $300 million to do development work. Obviously, that is not going to be sufficient to do what you need to do. So you have to get some from somewhere. And that additional funding usually comes from the contingency fund that you will only have access to at the end of the fiscal year. So based on how we operated, we engaged the contractors, asked them to do the work, finance the work in most cases. In some, like the smaller projects, agriculture, access roads, and those projects, they get some mobilization. But normally for the larger projects, road paving and these kind of things, we tend to ask the contractors to finance, similar to what this administration is doing. So it's nothing new. And then, of course, the expectation is that at the end of the fiscal year, when you get your additional resources from the contingency fund, you're able to pay off those bills. But what we always ensured is that contractors receive periodic payments so that they could maintain the commitments to the bank and that they can pay their workers and also continue to do work for the Tobago House of Assembly on behalf of the people of Tobago. So you never heard contractors, I mean, there were few complaints of people not getting paid, but generally, we never had a situation where contractors are delinquent in the bank by more than 30, 40%, where contractors are unable to pay their staff, and where you have bar owners complaining that they're not getting as much business as they used to get. And yes, you're not going to get as much business as they used to get when the 1,000 plus persons who were employed by Tobago contractors, when most of them are now home doing nothing, or maybe perhaps they now get a little 10 days on, 10 days off from the Tobago House of Assembly.
But, I mean, it's 1,000 out of 60,000 people.
And and when you look at the scheme of things, that is actually a lot.
All right, Mr. Denis, we'll unfortunately have to leave it out there because we are out of time this morning. Well, viewers, yes, you got a little extra time with Mr. Denis, and we are so grateful that he was able to stay with us, and we hope that he could be back. And as we dig it some more into some of these issues within our space. All right, so thank you again. And viewers, hope you have a safe and wonderful day, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Rise up to a brand new dawning as the passion start to rise. The energy fill the skies. I say thanks for favor to wake up and hear me.